if you think about, last 20 years again, every consumer industry got disrupted by an internet category creator. So retail, Walmart versus Amazon, and entertainment, Disney versus Netflix, and hotels, Marriott versus Airbnb. But if you think about restaurants, still McDonald's is $175 billion behemoth. It's an offline brick and mortar restaurant brand, the largest in the world. So where is the Airbnb equivalent of McDonald's, or where is the Amazon equivalent of McDonald's? And that is, in my mind, not delivering the food. That's got to be food made on the internet and the virtual format of restaurants. Which is why I believe this is the last frontier. Hasn't happened yet. But in the next 10, 15, 20 years, we will see an internet category creator on this, which will have world's most valuable, which will become world's most valuable restaurant company.
Hey, Jaydeep, thanks a lot for agreeing to do this. Really excited about this conversation, been a big fan of what you've built, and now want to learn more about how you've gone about doing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Jaydeep, it's always amazing to start with the origins. Could you talk about your time growing up, some early influences, career milestones before you got into your MBA, and would like to spend some time there because you've had a unique MBA experience as well. So would love to understand growing up, any entrepreneurial inspirations, some early milestones in your life that you'd like to share.
I wish that I had, sort of early epiphanies and entrepreneurial stints. But, fact of the matter is I'm a Bengali, grew up in Calcutta, and my father was a professor. My mom was a mathematics teacher. So, profit never really entered our house in terms of as a concept. And it was all like, football and, egg rolls and
right.
And really, really normal, like upbringing. Like every other Indian, I went to every other middle class Indian went to a good enough school and then went to my engineering. The one thing that stands out from my sort of college days was climbing. So I got hooked to mountaineering like really early when I was 17 or 18. So outside of probably Rebel now, that's the one thing that stayed with me for all these years. And in some sense, it has also helped me find my bearings and at different times in my journey. So there was a hiatus of about 10 years where I could not go back to mountains because of work and other stuff. But now I've started again last 4 or 5 years. And but during college days, going on a mountaineering trip was much more interesting than doing thermodynamics or things like that. And so, and it started with, my, I would say, excitement to be with friends in remote areas. And then that's how it started. But later on, it evolved into going to new places, learning, new cultures. And then eventually it sort of became, I would say, a way to think about things, solitude and things like that. So that's the one thing that kind of stayed with me from there. But rest everything, my engineering degree, where I was like 28th in a class of 29 people. So all those actually didn't have any bearing on whatever I have done, good or bad. So that's, I would say, in a nutshell, how it has been.
Amazing. And I think the endurance of a climber, a lot of parallels with that of a founder. So I'm sure that it definitely, physical endurance, mental endurance, and the endurance of a founder, they're different things, but some flavors of similarity, I would say. And we usually don't ask this question to a lot of founders because we focus on starting up, but you have a very interesting, like, double MBA. And a lot of our listeners, they, are figuring out career, they want to be a founder, or they've spent some time. But what was your thought process on doing another MBA after you'd done one from a pretty good B school?
after IML, at IML again, I got really busy in playing football and studying, and I broke my leg.
I see.
In the second semester. So a couple of semesters just went by, and I never really could recover. And I don't blame everything on that accident, but I was, I had 1 year of experience and work experience before that. I was not really ready for it, in terms of really learning from it, getting excited by the case studies, etc. I was probably at that point in time, I was in a different zone altogether. And as a result, again, I was I was a I was again one of the one of the worst performers in school at IIM. And also, I didn't sit for many of the companies that came on campus. Uh, you know, some of it was I was not shortlisted, but some of it was also that I was not interested, to be honest. And then I think the placement was like 4 or 5 days. I was one of the last ones to be placed, and um, basically the kickstart that usually people expect from an MBA, I didn't have that because of my own, uh, I would say, stupidity and lethargy and those sort of things. But then things started falling in place because I had some qualities, which is I could work alone. I go to a market and start some new business, which is what I ended up doing for a company in Pune. And then you know one thing led to another, and around 2003-4 we had actually started the first version of Faasos. And but it was just a lifestyle thing. We were basically missing the Calcutta rolls in
Right.
Pune. And
And I live in Pune. I'm from Pune. I understand why there must be like a huge student crowd and you must
yeah,
have filled the pool.
yeah, exactly. So but it was just a hole in the wall kind of place, and it was just a side gig. But I was like really missing uh, being in a job that I like, and making an impact, etc. And like most Bengalis, that the thing that you fall back on is studying, especially coming from a family that mine was. So we said, okay, we'll take a break, go to INSEAD, because that was only 1 year program. I actually applied to Harvard as well, but I didn't get through. I got through INSEAD, and it fit the overall scheme of things. It was 1 year, Paris, like outskirt of Paris, and a beautiful village, and a lot of peace of mind. So yeah, and there, I had to take a big loan as well, so to fund my education there. And I was like, I knew if I didn't land up a good job, etc., then I'd be in deep trouble. I actually mortgaged my father's home
Wow.
to fund that. Yeah. So that was the first time I probably studied in my life, and because uh, there was no option for me, and I did, like, for the first time I did really well. I probably was among the first 3-4 people in a class of 900 in at INSEAD, though they don't publish ranks, but I was in Dean's List, cracked every exam just out of fear, more than anything else.
Paid motivator.
Yeah. And then I got a job at McKinsey in London after that, and 4 years at McKinsey was again life changing for me, because I learned most of my, people think that being a consultant is about changing the world one PowerPoint slide at a time, but I learned more than that.
Very helpful, and it's a good segue into my next question. You're at fast track at McKinsey. You're going to become a partner, but the pull of your hole in the wall comes back. Um, Usually people end up like ignoring it and then staying, becoming a partner, and all that was there for you. Why did you take that switch at that time? And what was the thought process there of reviving um, the hole in the wall that you had? And I think Faasos in its earlier avatar was supposed to be a chain of rolls and wraps, but it's evolved into something more. Would love to understand that, thought process and what made you take the leap.
Yeah. So there were quite a few things. In fact, it was not one thing. I had just become an AP associate partner at McKinsey. I was doing rather well, as you said. I was fast tracking. But in 2009, my wife's father passed away. So, and her mother was here alone. And while we could, bring her back to London, for a few months, etc., but she was like feeling out of place and things like that. So that was one reason I wanted to come back to India. But one option was, coming to Bombay office in McKinsey as well. But then there were other things that were there. My daughters were like really young, and I was thinking, where should we settle down and where should we grow our daughters, and what atmosphere, close to family, far away from family. So there were like things like that. But there was another thing, which is Jubilant went public in 2009. And which is when I was thinking that India is unrestauranted, unbranded, and a Domino's franchise is the first. I mean, before that, I think Specialty Restaurant went public, like I think around 2007-8. But Jubilant was the one that kind of told me that there was a new breed of consumerism that was happening in India, and there are no brands, and food was always a passion, and so all of these things put together, I took a sabbatical to make up my mind and came back to India for 6-7 months on this sabbatical and to think things through. And that was the time I sort of decided after considering everything and the fact that, India was looked like a great market to build a brand, to build a business, and, and all of those things. So I thought, okay, and the Faasos by that time became 3 from 1. The guys who were running it, they made it to a couple of other locations as well. And it was doing well. People were loving the product. So I thought, okay, I can pick it up because, and then run with it. So that was, it was not driven by some big strategic thinking or anything like that. It was just circumstances and life stage, I would say, more than anything else. In addition to my, sort of willingness to build something in India in the brand space. Yeah.
And can you talk about the early days of Faasos, before we get into our topic, which is food as the internet's last frontier, which is something you've written about. But we'd love to understand early days Faasos. How was it evolving? You kept adding stores. What was the thought process, and how was the time like then in India? I mean, it was very different when I was in college. So from that lens.
So I think you're right. So we started on this journey and, putting up small format stores, largely delivery focused. Started from Pune, then Bombay, Bangalore, a few other places. And this is also the time when I recruited our first group of AFRs, Faasos entrepreneurs in residence, which is probably the decision I'm most proud of more than anything else, because these guys are still here. And 2012 is the time when these guys came on board. And together we were like a collegial team and, sort of building something together. And, typical discussions would be able to open Bangalore, who wants to go? And then someone would raise their hand and say, okay, I'll go and do it. And then drive down to Bangalore and then, build it. Both Kallol and I being, largely lazy Bengalis, we would never micromanage people or leave them alone and that sort of a thing. So that kind of worked for us, and we were growing pretty quickly. Obviously, Sequoia Capital came onto our, invested in us back in 2012, which was when we had like just a couple of stores, if I remember correctly. And but then around 2014, 2-3 years down the line, we were really struggling on making the economics work, because we had good sort of traction on I would say on the customer front. People were loving our product, but we were not really making money. And then the basic reason for that was, the rent. And this is hindsight, but I'll give you some statistics. Like India has 54 square foot of real estate space, like high street real estate space per 1,000 population. US has 21,000. And, India has 0.2 restaurants per 1,000 population, even now. China has 7, so it's 35x less penetrated. And then the reason is this, that, anyone in a locality, if there are 5 people wanting to open a restaurant, they're all eyeing the same property because there are no properties. And if you go down LBS or, some of these other places in Bombay, you will see not many places where you can actually put up a restaurant. And at that time, we were facing exactly that. Rent to sales ratio as a result in India is the highest in the world for restaurants because of this paucity of infrastructure. And, I remember going to a Sequoia conference where Doug Leone, the managing director of Sequoia, was speaking, and he said that the biggest job of a CEO is to remove friction from growth. And this was our biggest friction. And that got me thinking, and we were realizing that, real estate is our biggest friction. This is the reason India doesn't have restaurant chains, brands, etc. And this is also the reason India is the best place in the world to do cloud kitchens or internet restaurants. That's why you don't see our model being done anywhere else, and we've not been inspired by someone else. So that got us thinking, and we did a small survey of our customers and asked them one simple question. Have you seen or been to our outlets? Some 74% responded saying no. So that was a light bulb moment for us. If people are okay, buying food online or through a phone and getting it delivered without even visiting or seeing the store, then what's the point, spending money in building the stores and paying rent through your nose, etc. So we did our first kitchen. Now these things are called cloud kitchen, but back then it was just a kitchen on a first floor of a back alley in Marol in Bombay. And things started falling in place because our rent came down, but our delivery orders kept growing, because the market was opening up with lot of avenues to place orders. Swiggy, Zomato were coming along and things like that. So we've kind of found the anti-restaurant model that would work in India. There are many things in India that leapfrogged ahead of other things ahead of things in developed world, right? Like fintech or edtech or mobile versus landline telephony. I believe virtual restaurants in India is doing the same leapfrogging over physical restaurants. And that's because of the infrastructure in India or the paucity of it. So that puts us in a terrific position to build our business. And that's what we witnessed in the last 4 or 5 years. Like, we today in India have 4,000 virtual restaurants, but we have only 350 kitchens. So we don't have to put as many real estate pieces to launch and scale our brands. Globally, we have 400 kitchens, about 4,500 internet restaurants, 10 countries. And built on this premise that if you have one platform, which is nothing but your fulfillment network and supply chain, and secondly, your culinary technology, and third is your software technology to power that. So that's the operating system on top of which you can keep launching and building and scaling virtual brands. That's what we discovered in the last 4 or 5 years.
So I wanted to dive into our topic for this episode, which is food as the internet's last frontier. And I think you actually use that phrase. Can you tell us why and what makes food such a unique industry?
Yeah, I think, if you see 25 years of internet, the first thing that got internetized was books, and then travel, and then fashion, and then taxi, and then travel, like hotels also, like with Airbnb and things like that. So, and then the first wave of food tech as we know it happened through delivery. But if you really think about it, is that food delivery tech, not food tech, right? So the Swiggy, Zomato, DoorDashes of the world, what they have done is picking up food and delivering it to the customer in a beautiful way, right? But that still, in my mind, is a technology around logistics and delivery, not around food. So if you think about last 20 years again, every consumer industry got disrupted by an internet category creator. So retail, Walmart versus Amazon, and entertainment, Disney versus Netflix, and hotels, Marriott versus Airbnb. But if you think about restaurants, still McDonald's is $175 billion behemoth. It's an offline brick and mortar restaurant brand, the largest in the world. So where is the Airbnb equivalent of McDonald's, or where is the Amazon equivalent of McDonald's? And that is, in my mind, not delivering the food. That's got to be food made on the internet and the virtual format of restaurants, which is why I believe this is the last frontier. Hasn't happened yet, but in the next 10, 15, 20 years, we will see an internet category creator on this, which will have world's most valuable, which will become world's most valuable restaurant company. And, I don't know whether it will be us or not, but at least we are pioneers in this. I've seen pitch decks now from all over the world where you say we are rebel food of Brazil or rebel foods of Russia. So, but we have a chance. We have an opportunity, which is our life's work. So that's why this is so exciting for us. That, most startups in India, if you think about, they have been inspired by a US or a Chinese counterpart. But if you think about our business, we found it, we pioneered it. I'm not saying this is our brilliance, but the fact that we were born in India and India needed such a model, and the leapfrogging was possible in India, and that's why we are ahead of anyone else in the world in this. But obviously, it will take execution and culture building and vision, ambition, all of those things to do what I just described. But the opportunity is there.
And before we dive into the details of this opportunity, can you give us a quick overview? You touched on some of the stats about the quick service restaurant space in India in general, about how it's not as densely populated as China or the US, and that presents an opportunity. But what are some of the challenges that the industry faces? And can you give us the kind of macro picture before we dive into the details?
Restaurants actually is a 500-year-old industry. The first restaurant, you guessed it probably, it was in Paris. But in 500 years, it has not changed, right? It's the same way of doing things. And it became a, sort of an industrialized version of it with QSRs in the US. And the whole concept of QSR is standardized processes, standardized supply chain, location on a high street in a great footfall spot, and you have a great business, right? But when you try to import that model in India, there are many issues with that. The first one I talked about, the paucity of good real estate, right? So the rent just is abnormally high. 65% of restaurants die in India within year one because of high rent. And this is demand supply, right? If you want to open a restaurant, you're competing with 2-3 other people to get to the same spot. But the US, it's not the case. There are enough properties out there for everybody to survive and thrive together. That's why you have like 75 restaurant chains in the US with more than 500 locations each. In India, that number is 2, Subway and Domino's. That's because it's very, very difficult to, build rent by rent, high street location by location in India. That's challenge number 1. Second, which got solved to some extent with the multinationals coming in, is building a supply chain, which connects all of your outlets or whatever you call it, locations. Because without an integrated supply chain, you can't build brands. You can build mom and pop stores with but then if you want to build a biryani restaurant in Bombay and another in Delhi, you got to have the same ingredients for the biryani to taste the same. But, there has not been, enough development in the supply chain to do that. So people would use like local produce, etc., and then the biryani would taste completely different because the rice is different and the masala is different, and and things like that. That's how the Avdi biryani and the Hyderabadi biryani are totally different. But so building this supply chain was one challenge. And then the third I would say is how people look at the business of restaurants and building brands. People look at restaurants as I would say a playground for chefs, and that is great if you want to have one lifestyle restaurant. You're the best chef in the world. You create your magic every morning, and you serve great food. But when you do that in thousands of locations, the chef cannot be there in the thousands of locations, right? So how do you solve that? Otherwise, you don't build brands, right? You build labels, and they won't taste the same and everything. So I would say these are the big challenges in my mind. And then there are other things which are, food is a distributed business. So unless you have a like specific culture in your company or whatever you're building, because the moment of truth is happening, every corner of the country or the world, wherever you are, someone in your company is interacting with the customer. If you don't have the same cultural DNA, then it's very difficult, right? So again, you won't build brands, right? And so I would say these are a couple of things that we realized over time, and we worked on each of these, right? The first one, we made real estate almost insignificant in our business. It's like 2% of our costs, so of our revenue. So it's not even material anymore because of what we've done. Supply chain, we built supply chain country by country. We are, in Indonesia now, in Middle East, in India, we have done it. On culinary technology, making biryani the same in every location in India, we, about 3 years back, we put together a team of, and this was a long shot, okay? So we had a team of chefs, like 5-7 chefs, not in every kitchen, but centrally. We used to call it Culinary Innovation Center. And then we added a team of robotics and automation engineers to this team. This team was led by an ex-Apple guy who was responsible for making the iPhone camera. I'm not sure why he came on board, but I think the basic reason was a once-in-a-lifetime challenge of making great fresh food without the cognitive and physical skill of a chef. So this was like, this was the problem statement. And we went headlong into this, right? And we kind of realized that what is the chef doing? He's doing 3 things: picking the right ingredients, putting them in a particular order or in a particular quantity at a particular time, which is we call dispensing. And third is moving the vessel in a particular way, either, tossing or stirring or, slow heat from bottom. If you think about it, most cuisines in the world, these are the 3 things the chefs are doing everywhere in the world. If you can codify that knowledge through apps, through, automated stirrer, automated fryers and things like that, you can make the same fresh food, great quality food, without the cognitive and the physical skill of the chef. This has been the secret sauce for us for building, the brands that we could build, why they taste the same, across India and now overseas as well. So that's one thing we are very proud of, that building that operating system to create that platform to launch brands across cuisines. And yeah, and we are also very proud of the culture, the last piece I was talking about, of a culture of customer obsession, thinking customer first, being innovative, being owners of the business. So each kitchen of ours is managed by a CDO, because we believe that guy or the girl is the real CEO of the business. So with a special focus on delight, that's why we call them Chief Delight Officers. And these are the guys. And last year, at the middle of pandemic where sales dropped by 70% last April, then also we didn't have any layoff. And, last year out of the 350 CDOs, 1% left. So I don't want to talk it up too much, but I just want to make sure that it's understood that building a distributed business where you cannot replicate yourself, culture is the biggest part of it. So I would say these are the four big issues in building a restaurant business, and which we worked on, and we've still a long way to go, but I would say that's our platform.
No, it's amazing, and a lot of people talk about culture playing such an important role in the organizations, but I think what you've done is really unique, at least in your industry. You've almost created something like an FMCG company where you have one kitchen with multiple brands servicing different cuisines. And I love that way of thinking about it, right? How you've kind of distilled it down, thinking about it almost in terms of first principles and finding synergies between it. But why do you think it's been so hard for people to do this before? Why were you guys one of the first people to think about this? Because when you explain it, it sounds so obvious.
I think the real reason is that in our early team, there was no one from the restaurant industry. And that's why we always were curious. And we were always asking ourselves, unreasonable questions. And as we all know, all progress depends on the unreasonable. Right? So, when we moved to the cloud kitchen model, that was again from this thinking that what's the biggest friction in a business? Rent. And then asking customers, and then, getting to the cloud kitchen, like the kitchen model. And then the next epiphany that we had around 2016-17 is when we launched biryani and pizza under Faasos, and people were not buying it. We were like, why are they not buying it? And again, because we were not from restaurant industry, it was not obvious to us. But then someone in the room said, maybe they don't think Faasos can make good pizza. And Faasos is known for wraps, as even Viral was saying, about the chicken mayo wrap. So we got this, again, some sort of a light bulb went, and we launched another brand with the same pizza from the same kitchen. And that started having traction. So we realized that in food, one brand, one product, like Starbucks is coffee, McDonald's is burger, Domino's is pizza, and so on. There is no multi-cuisine famous restaurant in the world. You can't name one. So we realized here is an opportunity to build brands in different products without replicating the infrastructure. So that was I would say, the second light bulb moment. And also around that time, we realized that in all other consumer goods, customers are segments. But in food, customer missions are segments. Let me explain that. Let's say, car, either you drive a Mercedes or a Maruti, not at the same time, because either you're a premium customer or a mass market customer, either fly first class or coach, right? But with food, you have the 20 rupee chai and also go to a 5-star hotel with your friends at the end of the week, sometimes on the same day. So we realized that, food can be captured into a simple 2x2, which is single serve to group serve and value to luxury. So your single serve value is your weekday lunch, right? You want something quickly between your meetings. And your group serve luxury is your weekend dinner with your friends and family. Your group serve value is your office snacks. Your single serve luxury is, you want to have nasi goreng or sushi at some point in time. So people move between these four quadrants all the time, and it's unique. The only other industry where something like this happens, I think, is travel. But other than that, this is really interesting, right? And if you think about food brands, all of them are in this one of these quadrants. Like McDonald's is like single serve value. Domino's is groups of luxury. Mainland China is groups of luxury, and so on and so forth, right? So you can place all these guys on this chart. So we saw an opportunity where without replicating the infrastructure, we can play in all these quadrants. We can do a Beirut's biryani for groups of luxury. We can do a lunchbox for singles of value. We can do another biryani brand for singles of value, and so on and so forth, right? So this is an infinite canvas. Now, restaurants have a shelf life, right? After some time, people may not have biryani or burgers, 20, 30 years down the line, they'll have vegan, something else. We would always be in business because, we are drawing on this canvas, right? Without replicating the infrastructure. So that's why this is the time around 2017, 18, we realized we are actually on an infinite business model. And, food trends will change, and, people will have something new. In fact, even within a year, people sometimes have vegetarian during Navratri and, fasting during Ramadan and, and so on and so forth, right? We can tap all these opportunities because we don't have to build another piece of real estate to tap any of these. And that's why, there are multiple advantages that we got over a brick and mortar restaurant, like no location risk, no obsolescence risk, no failure risk, smooth utilization. Restaurants typically Saturday nights are full and the rest of the time they're just, paying rent and, no business. But for us, because we are on all those 4 quadrants, we are always busy, right? So we do not have that big issue of a restaurant. So all these things, because we were curious and we were learning on the go, we had a team which was always thinking first principles, didn't have a baggage. I believe this happened for us, and in fact, our last light bulb moment happened during COVID, when, we had to shut all our kitchens, like 80% of our kitchens back last April, but then we opened slowly as the lockdown opened up. But the brick and mortar restaurants were decimated, right? There was like 40% restaurants that went out of business forever. And some of these guys started coming to us and said, okay, you already have 300 kitchens. You already have the supply chain, the technology. You are in 50 cities, probably opening 50 more cities. Can we piggyback on you? Because, off street is, high street is not working for us. And that made another light bulb go off in our head, saying that, okay, if we are drawing on that infinite canvas, not necessarily everything has to be done by us. Like, should we do our own ice cream brand, or should we get a license for naturals and put them across India? And, that was, I would say, the third light bulb moment for us. And then we started, now in our kitchens, now we took naturals from like 2 cities to now 10 to 7 cities, took Madover donuts from 2 cities to 5 cities, and then we also got into this licensing with Wendy's, where we, opened 50 kitchens on a license for Wendy's, which is world's second largest burger brand, in the last 3 months. Like on our kitchen, we didn't have to put new kitchens on our kitchens itself. So when you put all these things together, we suddenly have discovered another model through which we can draw on that canvas I was talking about, the 2x2, faster and faster. So I see a point in 3 to 5 years time when every neighborhood in India, maybe 1,000 neighborhoods, each neighborhood, we will have 50 restaurants, virtual, but 50 restaurants that people can order from. Now imagine if a neighborhood has like, I don't know, 70, 80, 100 restaurants, how much of that ecosystem we would drive. And because we have now the blueprint and the model, that's why we believe this is an infinite business for us. Yeah, I'll stop here. I just realized I've been talking for a long time. Yeah.
No. I love that whole, the model that you have, essentially, almost the mental model, and thinking about it in terms of food visions. It's so unique. I love that framework. And I want to ask you one question that you've probably gotten a few times before. So I'm sure you have a good answer ready for it. What about Swiggy and Zomato? How do they change things? Why can't they do this as well?
See, I think, first of all, there is the business of food brands is not a winner take all business. So like as I was saying, the US has 75 companies with 500 plus locations each. So that's one. And secondly, I think, every company has its own DNA. Like if you think about travel aggregators, like Make My Trip or Expedia, Priceline, why didn't they get into hotels and airline businesses? They could, right? They have all the data, like where people are traveling. Why couldn't they open hotels? The difference from a retail private label and a private label on a service sector is that in retail private label, you don't have to learn new things. Like Amazon can go to the same manufacturer Samsung goes to and say, okay, give me an Amazon Basics phone. Rest I know how to distribute. But in hotels or airline, I have to run an airline, run a hotel. Same thing with Netflix. Can go to a producer and say, make me a great movie. And I call it Netflix Originals. But the same thing is not possible in a distributed service model like an airline or a hotel or food service. That's why in OTAs, you don't see this phenomenon. So I'm sure Swiggy or Zomato can do a cloud kitchen model, but most likely it will be a cloud kitchen as an infrastructure model where they don't have to get into building of brands. So, but at the same time, they can fuel supply. So, and they're doing it. And I think Swiggy has also done a private label, but I don't know whether it is growing or they're rolling it back, etc. But I'm, fundamentally, I'm not thinking that, okay, they're going to come and eat our lunch, because, in any value chain, the guy with the rarer asset captures most value. And India, the rarer assets is the food brands, the supply side. So we would have our time in the sun. And I believe we have enough, sort of entry barriers with our 50 city network, very soon 100 city. We are the only game in town. We are like 10 times larger than the next guy, only game in town if you have to launch and scale food brands in India. Post Wendy's, we are sitting on at least 50 other Indian brands, inbounding to us saying that, can we scale with you? And 10 other international brands wanting to enter India, talking to us. Nobody has this flat platform. But, competition, value chain dynamics, these are all good things because they keep us on our toes, keep us thinking all the time. And, almost invent the future where it is favorable to us. So, it is interesting times. Yeah.
Jaydeep, you're super thoughtful. I mean, like, it's amazing to have a conversation with you. I think if we didn't have a time limit, we could go on and on forever. It's amazing to learn how you think and very first principles. Fascinating how you described it, and I kind of agree with you on the Swiggy Zomato piece as well, and the parallel with OTAs makes sense. It does make sense. I wanted to ask a related question to this, and maybe it came out really well while you were describing it. Has writing helped you as a founder? Because I think you were one of the earliest founders to actually articulate very publicly what you are building. I actually am a very big believer in writing and sharing your thoughts and really evolving while doing that. Why did you start doing it? Do you think it makes sense? And has it helped you as a founder as well? Is it something you recommend?
Yeah, totally. I love writing. I'm an introvert, so I write more, speak less. So, and some of my memos to the team, of course, not all of them are like pleasant, of course, and I've got a lot of heartburns over the years because of my writing. But yeah, I love writing because it helps me think through things, and clearly sort of put my thoughts on a paper, and then it pushes me also, because sometimes when we speak, sometimes the logics are not really the storytelling is not really great, especially for someone like me who is not a natural speaker. So but when I write things down, I take all the, I find all the logical flaws and and things like that. In fact, even in our, we learned it from Amazon. Even in our meetings, they all are in writing format. So we start our meetings with no PowerPoint, but a 6-pager where people write, and first 15-20 minutes of our meetings are everybody reading in silence. And then it makes things, the writer, like when you do PowerPoint slides, and 4 years of my life, I only did PowerPoint slides. So I got a little bit bored of it, to be honest. But also when you do that, you skip, the real insights, because you will talk about it, while presenting the slides. But when you write, everything comes out. Everything, how you're thinking with, about a problem, how you're describing it. I know it's a long answer, but
Yeah, no. I mean, just to add to that, I think slides allow you to hide lack of thought as well, because it's a visual format.
Yeah.
In some way, text is naked.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do with it, right?
Yeah.
I do agree with you. And I think it's really hard to implement the writing memo style of Amazon, but kudos to you for doing that. Has anything you've written, played out completely differently from what you had written, and more public? I mean, internally, I'm sure like things play very differently, but something you put as a stake in the ground.
So, there were millions of things that I've written, all proven wrong, but not in public, because I wrote in public only when I understood something and I realized something, not as a, future prediction. So, I know there are people, and I think this is the big, I don't know whether you believe in this, but I am a ENTJ.
So I am exactly the same as you, by the way.
Sorry, INTJ, not E.
I'm ENTJ then. So I'm just like the extrovert.
Right.
Okay.
So I have seen people write, when a thought comes to them, they will write a blog about it first before executing. But I have always written when I've learned something, written publicly. Internally, I write all the time, and there are a lot of disastrous memos I've written over the years, but yeah, not in public.
Understand. Would love to conclude with our question we ask all our guests, which is, what is one piece of unfiltered feedback you've received that changed the way you looked at things? And you've talked about heartburn and disasters and things like that. Has anything stayed with you very long, and something that was right, maybe brutal? We'd love a more honest, brutal answer. I mean, you've been very straightforward here, but just that's the kind of answers we like on this one.
Well, I don't know how the one thing that comes to my mind, and I don't know whether this is as brutal as you would expect, but my initial years was a lot about how, when I started Rebel along with Kallol, it was a lot about how to do this, how to open a new city, etc., etc. And I continued on that, and then it became a little bit of where we need to go and what we need to achieve, and then let people do that. But there was a time I was not scaling as a leader. I was like, I was like really bogged down in. I never micromanaged, but I was always thinking, how to do this, how to do this particular thing, etc. Then someone told me, and later on I read also in one of the Jeff Bezos articles, that over time, if you can't graduate from how to what to who, you won't scale. And someone told me this, that you need to graduate to who. And I think that helped tremendously post that. Because right now, people ask me, I've started last couple of years, started mountaineering again, and which requires a lot of training. So I do, at least 10 hours of training every week. So people ask me, where do you find time? But I find time because I'm only focused on who now, like largely. My job is only to find the right person. Beyond that, I've started staying away from the hows and the whats to a large extent. And that helped me scale. People ask me, why do you, India is a big market, why do you want to do international? Why do you want to get to 10 countries? But I have the who's who are raring to go, become CEOs of their businesses. And that's a terrific position to be in. And so that I would say, there was a time when I was a little stuck in this graduating from how and what to who. But the day I did it, it helped me a lot.
That's an amazing insight to end with. Thanks a lot, Jaydeep. We'll open it up for Q&A now.